Welcome to Daytime Ottawa here on Rogers TV. Before we get to our first guest, I just want to do a big congratulations to all of the volunteers and participants and all the wonderful children that were involved, all of those great ambassadors, including myself. 24-hour Tremblant has been going on, as you know, for many, many years. This year it was record numbers across the board, over 4,300 participants, about 480-some teams, and they raised a record $5.8 million, and that was for Fondation Charles Bruno and Fondation Tremblant, and here in Ottawa for CHIO. So again, a big congratulations. It was so much fun participating. It was absolutely magical up there, and again, thanks to all the volunteers. You guys did such an amazing job. Well, speaking of great organizations, you'll recognize the next organization I'm going to talk about, and that is the Salvation Army. Their Christmas Kettle program, of course, has already kicked off, and I'm joined by Captain Laura Van Schaick. She's a Salvation Army officer. Laura, welcome to the show. Great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. Sounds like you had a fun weekend.
It was amazing.
Really exciting to be here talking about the Salvation Army, just one of so many amazing charities that are at work in Canada.
Yeah, and Laura, before we get to the campaign itself, let's talk about some of the great services and programs that they offer to some of the most vulnerable in our communities across the country.
Absolutely. So Salvation Army is active, of course, across Canada, really across the world, but here in Ottawa runs some fantastic programs. We have the Booth Centre downtown that runs street outreach, shelter program, addictions services. We have our Bethany Hope Center for young parents and children, so supporting these young families that really need a lot of support raising their children these days, to free music lessons, supports for newcomers to Canada. I mean, I almost want to say you name it, we do it here in the Salvation Army. We are the largest non-governmental provider of social services, which really just means we help an awful lot of people.
How did you get involved? Why did you want to get involved?
I always just had a heart for giving. Even as a young person, I was involved in, the Kiwanis Club in high school. I got involved in Rotary Club in university, and had always been involved in my church as well. And so the Salvation Army was a beautiful marriage of the two. I think that I get to not only serve in a faith community, but also be really active serving in the community, helping out in so many different ways.
We've had many organizations, many charities on over the last few months, and in particular, this time of year, and they've all talked about the growing need. I imagine you're seeing the same thing.
Absolutely. I mean, we cannot ignore the rising inflation costs in Canada. Grocery costs have gone up, gasoline prices have gone up, fuel costs, and so a lot of families are having to make some really difficult choices. Do I pay the mortgage or do I put healthy food on the table?
Right.
How do I fuel my vehicle and make sure that my children are having the supports that they need? And so we are seeing an increased demand for our services, particularly for families.
Like anything, the Kettle program has grown over the years as well, and there's new ways to give. But let's talk about that Kettle program, and that must be your biggest fundraiser of the year, right?
It is. It's our biggest fundraiser of the year, and I think our most visible as well. I'm sure you've seen these lovely Christmas kettles around Ottawa. There are about 35 of them at various locations throughout the city, and we're really excited to have them out and about. And as you walk by, of course, you can place a donation in the kettle. You can always put those coins or that cash in the iconic little bubble there. But so many of us are going cashless these days, right? And so we have a way now that you can give cashless. We're using this lovely little thing we call Tip Tap, and you can just tap your card, whether it's your Interac, your credit card, your Apple Pay. So many people are using their phones these days, right? And as you walk by the Christmas kettle, say Merry Christmas to whoever's standing there ringing the bells, and you just kind of tap the donation you want, right? So we've got
pretty simple.
5, 10, or 20. It's incredibly simple, right? And so everyone can give, and even a small amount counts. We've talked about how inflation is affecting those that are coming to the Salvation Army utilizing our services. We recognize it's also affecting our donors. And so if you're used to giving, $20 and tapping the 20, and this year you can only tap the 10, that's okay. Every small amount adds up and makes a difference right here in our community.
You mentioned, sharing a Merry Christmas to that person that's standing beside the kettle. I imagine they're all volunteers, so a big shout out to them as well, right? Every year they step up.
Absolutely. Hundreds and hundreds of volunteer hours go into our Christmas Kettle campaign, and you're right, they do absolutely step up. But if you're looking for a way to get involved, again, maybe money is tight this year, but you still want to give back and you want to volunteer with the Salvation Army, you can absolutely do that. Just go to salvationarmy.ca/volunteers, and there'll be a little form that you can fill out there, and the Salvation Army will be in touch with you and find the the branch of the Salvation Army that's closest to you.
You just answered my next question. I was going to ask you about volunteers. So that's great, and it is incredibly important. And let's go back to some of the programs and services, because schools is a big one, and you mentioned them. Just having a healthy snack, incredibly important to so many young people, isn't it?
Absolutely. So I am myself responsible for overseeing the work of the Salvation Army in Barrhaven.
Okay.
And we have some amazing partnerships with the schools in that part of Ottawa, where we're able to provide healthy snacks, warm socks, especially important this time of year, toques and mittens, so that if children are coming to school maybe not quite prepared for the day, the school is able to provide them those necessities to get them through the day, make sure that they're having a good time at school. And you're right, that nutritional piece when you're learning is so important.
You mentioned the struggles, right, with inflation going up and just everyday families, right, having a tough time. And I think you gave a great example. If you're used to doing a $20 donation, maybe you could only do a $10 or a $5 this year. Outside of monetary donations, is the Salvation Army asking for other things, especially this time of year, warm outfits, hats, mitts, this sort of thing?
Absolutely. One thing in particular that Salvation Army also does, especially this time of year, is provides toys for children at Christmas. So again, in terms of these hard decisions that some parents are having to make, do I put healthy food on the table or do I put a present under the Christmas tree? Very real struggle for a lot of families this year, and so the Salvation Army, through our Toy Mountain program, is going to be providing about 25,000 children in the Ottawa area with a toy this Christmas. And so there are not only kettles around town, but also toy donation bins throughout town. And then, of course, warm coats, toques and mittens. We will always make sure that those go to people that need them.
Yeah. What's the team like at the Salvation Army? Just the way that you talked about it in the beginning, and the reason that you wanted to get together and be a part of it and give back to your community. Just tell me a little bit about the atmosphere at the Salvation Army.
You know what? Everyone comes to work every day, whether they're a paid staff or a volunteer, with a smile on their face. Especially this time of year, there's a real sense that we are making differences in people's lives that is long lasting, especially when you stand at the Christmas kettle. I've done a couple of volunteer shifts myself this season, and it's amazing to hear the people come up to you and say, I remember when I was young and the Salvation Army got me, a Christmas present, or I remember when times were tough and the Salvation Army was able to help with some food. Even some veterans still that have these incredible stories of the Salvation Army assisting on the front lines during the war. Like, it's just, there's such history and richness of service, and I think that brings joy to everyone that is part of the Salvation Army team.
Yeah, and I guess it's grown over the years, right? And its purpose has changed over the years as well, hasn't it?
Absolutely. When you think about the history of the Salvation Army, for a time we were very active in the healthcare industry.
Right.
Now that obviously has become part of the public sector, and so we've moved on to other areas where we're able to assist: shelters, addiction services. We're helping a lot of newcomers to Canada these days. That's a really big thing, is being able to provide supports for new families. Ukrainian refugees, people from all over the world. So you're right, the Salvation Army over the years has pivoted to wherever the need is. We want to be there assisting. And
people can donate online as well, right? You still have your 1-800 number going, so if they don't happen to come across somebody with a kettle, they can do it in that fashion as well.
Absolutely. So you can go online, www.salvationarmy.ca, enter your information there. We'll make sure you get a charitable tax receipt for that. Excellent. It also tracks your address, which I think is really great. So if you're giving from an Ottawa address, the money will go to Ottawa. 1-800 number, 1-800-SAL-ARMY.
Thank you. We'll be right back after this.